What's up guys, welcome back. So let's go ahead and go over what are going to be the best classes to consider in Season 2 of Diablo 4. We're actually going to have kind of two tier lists in this video, as most people do want to know what is going to be the fastest class to go ahead and start leveling up so you can get some of your powers, as certain classes do get stronger with time, but those are going to be towards the later stages of the game when maybe you can get some of the uniques, like Tempest Roar on the Druid is fantastic, but you're not going to be able to start off with it. So starting right off, I do want to go ahead and mention a quick few things. There are bugs that exist in the game, and there are still being fixed in terms of the glyphs, the Paragon nodes. Some of these just have bugs, and with the introduction of newer things into the game, take every YouTuber's video, including mine, with a grain of salt, even if they are correct in terms of like all the different damage multipliers with these multiplicative versus additive things. Just keep in mind that there are bugs that exist in the game, and obviously we're making this video before the season comes out, so you guys can kind of get ready to go ahead and play in the brand new season. So some of these things are in theory going to be untested, but overall these are going to be relatively accurate, I would say, as long as we don't have any major bugs where certain things just literally don't even apply, right? In the very earlier stages of some of these newer changes with these newer glyphs and or modifications, some things may not apply 100% correct. So starting right off, in terms of like the leveling tier list, what are the best classes to play in a season 2? I want to go and just start off with just telling you straight up, this is just the best. Rogue by a long shot is one of the best classes to start off with, and the reason why is because all you need to do is get that twisting blades aspect, and you could zoom through all content into the game up until the later stages where you could still play twisting blades at maximum level. If you just throw on your poison imbue, just start scaling dot damage, the rogue is going to be an excellent class in the early to late game. It's a very smooth leveling experience. I've leveled multiple level 100 rogues and is by far one of the smoothest leveling experiences. Now let's go to the opposite side of the spectrum with the barbarian, where in terms of leveling, it's one of the slowest classes in the game. You have to build up your fury, then you have to expend your fury, and a lot of times you're just not going to have that amount of resource that the other classes would generate, and that is one reason why I think the barbarian is kind of still in a relatively weak spot for leveling. So in terms of the progression, what can make this faster? If you want to play a Thorns barbarian, I genuinely feel it's not that bad, but if you're playing anything but Thorns, it's a pretty slow leveling experience, and that's because, well, you just have to generate your fury in order to hit and damage things for good actual numbers, as the game doesn't really let you play with your basic skills as a form of damage. There is a change with some of these vampiric powers in Season 2, but that's going to be a major node to get the one we're going to be able to get a massive bonus to your basic skill damage. Next up, in terms of the classes, I want to go and put the Necromancer in the B tier for leveling, and the reason why is because even with the more recent updates to the minion buffs, and minions are actually getting heavily buffed in the most upcoming changes, the Necromancer still lacks mobility, and it's something that I really wish they would actually address in the game. Just giving them just a blood rush. It could be literally copy and pasted from Diablo 3, just some form of mobility, because they are quite strong overall, because corpses are kind of another form of resource that you can explode, and the minions are still going to be really good, especially with the newer changes with the uber bosses. That's going to be something we consider as well when we're building out our endgame tier list, which we'll go over here in a second. But the Necromancer is still a great class, and it's not like they suffer from any damage problems. It's just that they don't have any mobility. With Rogue, you have dash, you have shadow step, you have natural increased movement speed. Where Necromancer, you gotta do like shadow damage, and it's not even close to being up 100% of the time. So next up over here, we have the Sorceress. So Sorceress isn't really that bad earlier on, but they actually get a lot stronger towards the end game when you can get like Oculus, which actually got a massive buff. There's also the changes where the damage over time is going to be really, really good for Hydra. And with the Sorceress, once you get teleport, once you're like the 20s, because we're kind of considering this part of the tier list for the leveling progression, the Sorceress is actually quite great as soon as you get teleport. Being able to teleport through walls is like a huge advantage. There's very few other classes that let you do it. Rogue can teleport through walls, but it's not the easiest thing to do with Shadow Step, but it is possible. But yeah, the Sorceress being able to teleport through walls, it's just going to be very, very good in general. But like A to S tier here, again, as soon as you get your enchantment slots, you get the double teleport, or if you want to just kind of have lots of different mastery skills, you can just throw out Firewall and just walk through it. It's just a breeze to level with Sorceress. So A and S tier, as soon as you get teleport, it's really, really solid overall. Now, what about the Druid? Now, Druid does have some companion buffs, and with the companion Druid, Druid, honestly, in the very earlier stages, because most of the stuff will just die in a couple hits anyways. The Druid isn't too bad, but is heavily reliant on having aspects, heavily reliant on getting certain like uniques to make the build actually feel good. I'm going to put it right down here with the Barbarian. I think this is a very solid list over here. I mean, if you want to put Sorceress over here, it's kind of debatable, but for the most part, I would say this is a pretty solid leveling tier list, and this is what I would consider and my recommendations for some of you players that are kind of interested in just going a little bit faster in the earlier stages. You can get different aspects that you can save for your other characters. You can acquire gold, or maybe your goal is, I just want to fight those newer bosses as soon as possible with the new Vampiric powers. This is kind of what I would recommend. Now, that's not to say that Druid, Barbarian are terrible classes. They can actually be very good towards the later stages of the game when we go over what I'm going to be considering the meta in terms of this boss for Season 2. There's these new Uber bosses, right? Now, we can go to D4 Army and look at what was good last season for the classes, and while some of them are going to be kind of transferring over to Season 2, there is a massive nerf to crit damage, vulnerable damage, and there is basically a massive buff in crit and vulnerable damage scaling with some of these newer Paragon nodes. So even though a lot of people may think, oh, crit and vulnerable damage are useless, that's actually incorrect. There's a lot of these buffs, and I'll go over some of these newer changes here before we go over kind of the reasons why. I'm going to give you guys some suggestions on some of these other classes in terms of what to play, and certain other builds, like for example, like the Tornado Druid, will still be very popular. However, there are other things to consider, like the Pulverized Druid, because of Overpower being another damage bucket that you can't really hit on other classes, which can be quite nice, since again, we lose out on crit and vulnerable in terms of their multipliers being able to go past their like base of X20 on vulnerable and X50 on crit strike damage. So there are a few builds here that I want to mention that are going to be great for the end game, right? These are going to be like level 100. I'm going to mainly be focusing in on the end game bosses, and while we haven't even seen them, and I want to get this video out to you guys before the season starts so you guys can kind of plan. Some of these bosses, we don't know what the mechanics are, and I want to say damage over time is going to be a very good thing to consider with the new Vampiric powers adding lots of multipliers to damage over time. And let's go over kind of my reasonings here for every single class. So starting right off, like I said, there could be some bugs that exist in the game. We're still getting things that are being added into the game, but let's start off with the Barbarian. So what is going to be good with the Barbarian? So previously, if we just even look at what was good previously with the Barbarian, it was mostly going to be anywhere from the double swing. We got Whirlwind. We do have a couple like bleed builds here, but bleed Whirlwind is going to be actually pretty good going into the next season as well, because again, damage over time didn't essentially get nerfed. There are a few things in the patch notes where certain like life modifiers were actually scaling some damage over time, and that has been adjusted, but we got some buffs, so hopefully it'll even out. They said on the campfire their goal is not to actually nerf us, but we are actually in theory going to get more damage. We'll have to wait to see if that's actually true, but I want to give them the benefit of the doubt in that we are going to be stronger than we were before with these newer changes. So with bleed, you actually get an insane amount of damage with bleed. If any of you guys have seen some of the Uber Lilith kills, again, keep in mind, some of these things have been nerfed, but overall, just bleed Barbarian is going to be very, very powerful. Getting another 15 on Gushing Wounds can be nice. There's some talk in the community about Upheaval being very good. However, Upheaval, it's a relatively slow attack, right? The Barbarian has to wind up and then hit. Some of these bosses may be kind of fast, and we'll have to kind of factor in some of these unknown things. And what I want to say is most people will always be playing Whirlwind, because that's kind of a huge popular thing. Ever since Diablo 2, people love the skill Whirlwind. They love the spin to win mechanic. So think with one of these passives, Gushing Wounds getting buffed, I think it's going to be a very popular one. I mean, it's a 15% buff, and there's technically the Overpower one, but I don't know if everyone's going to be playing Overpower with bleed, but maybe you can consider it. Next up, I want to talk about Druid. So Druid, in terms of what was popular last season, it was definitely going to be the Tornado Druid, and it's still going to be actually not that bad. With these newer changes to the Thunderstruck, our storm skills deal bonus damage equal up to 50x the total amount of our damage to close and damage to distance. So normally, if you would have these two items or stats roll on the item, you think this is garbage item, rotate, roll something off. But now it's actually going to be pretty easy to roll some items if you want to get the Paragon Thunderstruck. I think this is going to be an excellent addition to Druid for any of the Tornado builds. builds, but I think Pulverize is going to be quite great as well, with Overpower just getting a bunch of extra damage. Look at this Ursine Strike, while healthy, 25 multiplicative damage, and it's getting increased, another 25% increase to Overpower damage. So yeah, I think Pulverize Druid may be one of like the big powerhouses. If you like those fantasies of like the Hodabarb, I think that this is going to be a very, very great build as well. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about the next class, which is going to be the Necromancer. So Bone Spear actually took some nerfs. I think it's totally going to be fine though. It's a small like slap on the wrist, but minions will be actually very powerful. And the reason why is if you go and check out some of the most recent changes for minions, we get Death's Defense. So we just get this, which is awesome. So the minions aren't going to be losing their maximum life. Now it's changed to something else, but you just get it. So this is going to be awesome for bosses, because one of the problems is unless you invest into this, well, your minions just get like deleted on bosses. But minions are going to be pretty good with the Ring of Mendelin, and there's just a massive, and I mean massive amount of just buffs overall to minions. Just so many changes. There's like a shadow like bonus damage for damage over time, but just overall all of the minion changes, they all add up. There's just a massive amount, and with the new Vampiric powers, there is more multipliers on your minion damage. So I think minions will be pretty good with the upcoming season. Now, as far as Rogue, the only ones that I was kind of interested in checking out, which was the Victimize passive, this could be kind of good. If you like the playstyle of the Barber, this is getting a massive buff. Victimize damage is going to be increased by 120% of your damage versus vulnerable. So you actually still want to stack vulnerable damage, which you're going to get exploit anyways if you're playing Rogue in 99% of builds, which are pretty much going to be Twisting Blades. But there's also another change where no witness can actually scale ultimate damage. This one's kind of something they're going to have to get massive amount of cooldowns, but with Hakon's, the amulet, you can maybe actually run a Rain of Arrows build with the ultimate, so that could be something to consider. But the only one I really liked was the Victimize one. That's a great amount of damage, since now you can actually consider dropping like Siphoning Strikes as well as your extra regen with the previous passive that everyone was running that gave you like damage reduction. Now you can maybe scale Victimize and you get a massive amount of damage with one of the newer Vampiric powers just giving you basically Siphon Strikes pre-nerfed at 100% value, which is really good. It gives you 3% every time you activate a skill. All right, let's talk about one of the classes I think is going to be the best here, which is going to be a Hydra. So Summon Hydra does a massive amount of increased damage. Now this is one of the things that is for the burn. It's a node on it. So it's not you just get Hydra 60% damage that's getting increased, which is I guess 48 from this number. It's the burn damage, but it's fine. That's all we really care about anyways, because we're going to be doing dot damage. There is a nerf to Hydra where it used to scale off of your, scaled off of the enemy's HP, and now that has been nerfed. But remember, now we're going to be getting a bonus of item power, and it's scaling off of the item power, so I guess it's going to be more consistent. So Hydra is going to be looking pretty good. There's also a massive buff to Oculus, which is good. This is just awesome because Oculus is basically used to go around super fast. So if you like speed builds, that's definitely going to be for you. And this is why I want to actually start off with Sorceress in my season 2. So our conjuration skills have reduced, well, this doesn't really matter over here, but they deal bonus damage equal to ×3 of the total amount of your bonus damage with fire, or cold, fire, and lightning. This is one of the craziest nodes in the entire game, and the reason why I'm going to be starting off playing Hydra is because one, it's already massively great for bosses because you just throw them down and you run around, right? I'm going to do Chain Lightning Hydra, and the reason why this is so good is they even mentioned on the live campfire chat that it's going to be able to do a triple bonus. That means if you get any non-physical damage, this triple dips on a multiplier, and it has no cap. It doesn't say like at some sort of value, like now we can only have 50% crit damage multiplier, but this has no cap, and this is going to be super, super good as long as it works properly again. So looking at like the end game, again, Twisting Blades, Poison Imbue, Rogue, damage over time is going to be king, I think, in the season for the bosses. Hydra, Pulverize is going to be good. This is not a damage over time. Whirlwind Bleed, Ren Bleed. This is supposed to represent like any minion build with like Mendelin. I think that's going to be pretty strong. There's also some shadow or damage over time, which that one I'm going to kind of consider untested. But I think in terms of doing bosses, this is again talking about mostly endgame bosses here. But there's a few other builds. There's the Shred Druid. There's also the Hurricane with the boulder that spins, but it knocks everything back. So I'd rather just play Whirlwind Barb at that point if you like kind of like a spin to win build. Blizzard's probably going to be pretty good for bosses, but I think that yeah, just the dot damage is going to be super, super good. There's also Arc Lash that you can consider if you want to. Double Swing, Bone Spear, and Upheaval, I put them in here. But anyways, that's going to be my tier list and my thoughts in terms of the build. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new, subscribe to the bell, and I'll see you on the next video. And tell me, what class are you going to be starting in Season 2?